Hello and welcome to Optional Rule. My name is Scott. I'm the host of this weekly D&D discussion show as I work through all things related to D&D session prep, how you can run your game and bring you ideas that might be useful for you in either your play experience or your running experience as a DM in Dungeons and Dragons. I hope this just fosters the discussion a little bit more about the nuances and intricacies and all the things to consider about Dungeons and Dragons itself. I'm actually going to go ahead and improve the size on this a little bit. I know that it's not always so very fun to read on the screen. So this week, I'm going to do a lot of discussion around session prep. I have a one-shot, an interlude style game, and I'll explain what that is in a second. And I would love to take your questions today, by the way. So if you're joining me now or anytime later, you can always post them in the comments down on the tavern wall or on Twitch or Twitter or whatever. YouTube. I stream simultaneously to Twitch and to YouTube. I might start doing Facebook. Someone asked me about that. I'm unconvinced that that's the place to go, but if that is of interest, please let me know. I'd be happy actually to stream to Facebook at the same time. So anyway, you can engage me on social media. I'm Optional Rule everywhere. No space, just Optional Rule. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me on Twitch. You can find me on YouTube. I have a little Instagram as well. You can find a blog, optionalrule.com, and go ahead and I'll post rules that I create, different gaming ideas, items, monsters, all those things will eventually go up there as well. They usually get tried out first on Twitter for some feedback before I post them to the blog. This is the new channel, so as always, I would really appreciate it if you can give it a like, thumbs up, subscribe, follow, suggest it to friends, post it to social media, snail mail people in other countries about it, whatever you can do to help the show, that would be great. I'm really just trying to foster a discussion here. I stream because I want to just engage people about D&D. I've been doing D&D for about 40 years, and I love the topic. It's an evergreen topic because there's so many twists and turns and nuances and all of those things related to D&D. Now, today I'm going to do a little session prep. I have some ideas that I got off of someone on Twitter, actually, and let me find what's Laura's Twitter handle to give her a little Hottinger Laura. I hope Librarian, you can find her on Twitter. She had a great post this morning because I was searching for this idea for what's called an interlude adventure. And so I'll need to find an interlude adventure. So I have a campaign that's happening right now. I'm doing Rime and the Frost Maiden. I'm doing a heavy remix of it that I will be posting to my blog. But I don't want to post it too soon because I don't want to spoil things for my players. So I'll post it as I work through content there. But this is an interlude campaign, and that means one shot, and that means that I run across times in my campaign like everybody does where a player can't make it. I try to keep those to a minimum. We play every week, but we're in the holidays now, especially, and one player might be out with family or friends or something like that. So we're doing a one shot. They don't want to continue the campaign without that character. A lot of groups don't want to do that, and that's great. That's group cohesion. That's what you want. Hi, welcome to the stream. Go ahead and post a question or in chat if you have any. I'm happy to talk a little bit more today. But anyway, so the interlude adventure is an adventure that should be an independent one shot separate from the game. And you can do it lots of ways, but what I refer to this as, I haven't heard somebody else use this term, it's what I term. It seems an independent adventure, but it's actually related back to the main campaign in some way that is satisfying or sets up a storyline or gives the player some more information or context, even if it's out of character, for something that's happening in the campaign to sort of add value to that campaign, to add deeper story. So I've done that a bunch of times for instance, in a previous campaign, I ran an Eberron campaign last year before the pandemic shut all face-to-face gaming down. And in that, the player's main story was to recover a crashed airship in Eberron. And I ran an interlude adventure one time about how did that ship crash in the first place. So it was all about sort of leading up to the adventure. Now, the thing that makes interlude adventures more difficult to do as a one shot than other adventures is you usually have an outcome you need to hit. You have a place that the things have to converge on that that you need to launch into your campaign with. It's not so strict. It's not so hard. You do yourself as a game master by actually creating plot this way. Don't give it a single baked outcome if you don't have to. And I'm about to actually counter myself in a moment when I talk about this interlude adventure. But if you leave a lot open to what could happen at the end of that one shot, then what you're doing is allowing the players and the action of that one shot to paint the outcome, to add to the narrative of your main campaign. And the players love it because they kind of sit back and they sort of know what happens and everything is familiar to them. And even if it's out of character knowledge, it's just a way to add and enhance things within the game. So that was great. That's what I'm doing here today. So what I have is I have this Rime of the Frost Maiden campaign. The players have to take a break this week because one player is off with some family for the holidays, of course, understandable. And so what I want to do is I want to set up. I actually didn't have an idea until Lauren's post today, which I'll get to in a second. Thank you so much, Lauren, if you're watching this post, this stream. I was looking for an idea. I wanted something to connect things back to, but I couldn't figure out what it was. And one of the things I wanted to use this as an opportunity to do, and this is where any one shot can do this, is you can change up the pacing or the styling or the setting of the campaign to refresh things a little bit for players. This is really important in Rime of the Frost Maiden because it happens in this eternally dark northern region that's locked in this magical darkness and incredible cold. So I didn't really want to have another adventure in Icewind Dale because I want to give these players a chance to get a break and do something else. So I'm going to set it in the polar opposite of that. Haha, joke intended. In Chult, the jungles of Chult. That does a couple of things for me. One, the players will have a different, and they'll deal with heat and they'll deal with jungle environments and the creatures that are down there and give them a break from this sort of oppressive polar environment. And instead they'll have an oppressive heat and oppressive jungle. But it also actually sets you up well because the players don't know that I'm creating an interlude one shot. They don't know that this is going to connect back to the main campaign. And so they get to be a little surprised at the end, which I love. I love that. I hope I can pull it off. I should say they don't get to be. I'm going to try to get them to be. I don't know if it'll land. I don't know if they will realize it or not realize it. So quickly, what the setup is. I needed something to connect the players to. I've had a plot thread out there in my, and I hope my mic's not clipping. I've got a comment or two about that. So I'll give you the setup in a second. I've asked for questions from Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube. I've got a couple coming in. Actually, I'm going to take that before I get into this. But anyway, I will say I'm going to have this ends up with a Mind Flayer ship crashing in Icewind Dale, which is that counter thing I just said. Try not to come out to a specific outcome, but I'll tell you why that's important in a second. And there's some spoilers for Rime of the Frost Maiden here, so be aware of that, especially if you're one of my players. Go away. So we'll get there in a second. But let me answer a few questions that were asked on Twitter. All right, so this is not related to this campaign. There's a question here about so this is an odd question, but what, having gamed so long, my Twitter followers know that. They're asking, what do I think is the current, what do they say? You've been gaming a long time. What's the current trend that you dislike the most in D&D crowd? Dislike. I hate questions about disliking. So, double negative there. So anyway, yeah. So I'll answer that. So the thing that harshes my mellow right now. This is going to be ironic because I'm live streaming. I don't like that we're commoditizing one another. I think that's not healthy for the environment. I think that, ironically, I think live stream in the creator ecosystem, at least the ones that I interact with, is generally better than this other thing, which is this sort of rise of the professional GM. And I'm not disregarding them. I think the professional GMs are fine. It's this. So there's a subset of them that they use that term pro GM in a weird way to grab power. Like they're trying to score points with it, and they are some of them are trying to create this sort of gatekeeping effect on this little crowd that they're trying to foster. And gaming is most healthy when it's the broadest crowd that you can find out there. So when they use that throw around that term pro GM, it's not a thing. I mean, gaming is a hobby, so it's a little weird and it's a little creepy, to be honest. And they're trying to pass themselves off in the same way we say pro athlete, that it implies a skill level above other people. It applies some sort of order of magnitude of their contributions to the hobby, and it is a hobby, than other people. And it might be true. So actually, they might be an amazing GM, but just calling yourself that doesn't make it so. And just getting money out of people certainly doesn't make it so. So that's probably the thing that I think it just harshes my mellow. Anything that brings the community down, that bisects it more, that creates gatekeeping, I just think it's creepy. And this, there is a little bit of a rise with Patreons and things like that, of monetizing one another. Now, I'm not against that. I don't think it's unhealthy, but it can lead to unhealthy behavior about how you interact with people and making your interactions with people transactional. And so anyway, that's my answer to that. There's another question about the swinginess of, this came out of a discussion with Think DM, who I love, by the way. I hope you give them a follow on Twitter. And they have a great blog. There's a question about the swinginess of there's a topic, a thread we were discussing about not having a binary outcome for D20s in D&D. And I think this is important to point out, because when people don't quite get this about skill checks, saving throws. Saving throws are a hard one to get around. But the thing about D20s in D&D is there's no odds for a single die roll. Odds don't actually come in to a single die roll. When you have a single D20, when you roll it, you're as likely to get a 20 as a 1, as a 13, or whatever. So talking about even if you have a plus to a skill, talking about the odds of a single die roll outcome really isn't productive, because it's what they call linear probability scale, right? Any number is as likely along a flat line as any other, as opposed to something like rolling 3d6, which produces a bell curve, which means that the combination of dice can add up to more numbers in the middle. There's more variations that add up to more numbers in the middle than the ends, because it reduces the number you can roll. So D&D is really dependent on things playing out over a series of rolls and not being binary. That's so like pass fail. That's what the combat system in D&D is. People don't really realize this, but hit points and all this stuff, that's just a way of saying that you, with the D20, only determine success or failure by their roll. And then the magnitude of success or failure is really about your damage roll. And that's what goes up as you level up. That's what goes up as you get greater power or greater abilities, because it's saying that, okay, these boundaries of damage, the scale of damage you can do is dependent on these die rolls. So combat is based on a series of rolls, not a single roll, unless you're like first level, which is why people hate first level. But it's a success over a series of rolls that have this rate limiting step of damage that you get in this attrition game. Now that all goes out the window when you get into skill rolls for too many DMs. They create this binary case of, you have this big outcome that you're dependent on, so you have the single roll, even if it's a +5 year skill or whatever, and they and people put a lot of attention to that, but that's really the coin flip. It's not really odds. You're not really talking about odds with a single roll. So hanging everything on a single roll, in my opinion, is not the best way to design an encounter, one, and two, it's actually not really what the system intends to do, and I don't think we realize that. So how do we not do that? Well, you need to have an escalating set of risks and danger, or an escalating set of successes or contributions as they do more and more rolls or get greater success. So jumping across a chasm is a great example. Jumping across a chasm shouldn't be you pass or you fail and plummet to your death. That shouldn't be the option, because a D20 can be a lot of things, right? So created that, the first roll you might get across and sort of hanging on from your fingernails, or you might fall to a ledge below it and take some damage, but you might be able to climb up, or there's a series of athletics rolls that might be necessary to get to the other side of that chasm, or just tell them you can't make it. It's too far for you. But that sort of single roll failure, death, that's not a great outcome for D&D. That's why people sort of hate spells that have a roll or die effect, power forward kill is an often brought up one. Something like I'm trying to think of other examples, but there's a bunch of examples in the game. It's not really worth going into every individual example, but I think you can see what I mean. Even saving throws try to play at this, right? That you get half damage if you pass or fail. It's not a sort of all that or nothing. Lower level spells tend to have either you take the effect or you pass, and you don't take the effect at all. So they try to stay away from that often in D&D. And I think you should think through that as well as a GM, understand how probability scales work and how that all plays out over time. Now, that doesn't have to be just on the DM. Offer as a player, one of the reasons DMs often do that is because they're trying to keep a game moving along. They're trying to keep the session moving, and they maybe got caught off guard by a player's request of jumping on something or rolling a history check for something or something like that. So tell the GM what you're looking for out of that role. Don't say I'm trying to jump heroically across or you can say I'm trying to jump heroically across a chasm, but just tell them I'm trying to escape these foes on this side, or I'm trying to get to the other side so I can do an attack. And that gives them some sort of scale. Like maybe you fail your roll and you get to the other side, but you don't get to do your attack. That's a different way than just plummeting to your death to deal with failure, right? So give them some sort of idea of what you're trying to accomplish with it, and that creates more play for the DM to help negotiate how that role might go over time. So yeah, that's what I think there. All right, so let's get back to this interlude one shot. So what I wanted is interlude one shot that ties back to this Rime of the Frostmaiden game, and ends up adding to the story. And I had a plot thread out there that I have not tied up, but not known what I was going to do with, which I'll exit out of this and go to my regular session notes. Do one here. So session 11. This is the session I prepared for last time in last live stream that I haven't gotten to do because we had to cancel last week as well, which is why we want to do this upcoming session. So plot threads I have here. I have a bunch of plot threads, and I need something for the Arcane Brotherhood, which is down here. So I have the Arcane Brotherhood. I have some plot threads. Actually, I think I'm going to throw this out. I think I'm going to throw most of this out and go about with something else, because I was coming up with this plot of the spirit that they were interacting with, but it was falling flat. One of the players' backstories that I have is here. A player called Nim. He wants to thwart the Arcane Brotherhood. Don't worry about this cursed vessel of Orcus, but he wants to thwart the Arcane Brotherhood. That's the whole reason he's in Icewind Dale. He knows they're coming here looking for something, and he doesn't know what. So he's trying to discover what it is, because it's never good with the Arcane Brotherhood, and he wants to either get it for himself or keep them from getting it. But I never came up with the MacGuffin. I never came up with what I wanted him to do about this. And I thought I'd punted on it. I wanted to come up with later, but now we're getting later. We're 10 sessions in, and I want to do something with it. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm cutting the Netherese city, which is what the original Arcane Brotherhood plotline was tied to. I'm cutting that whole section, it's the last chapter of the book, cutting that out because the climax of the Rime of the Frostmaiden to me is the Frostmaiden. I don't see the point of having a whole big set of encounters after that. So, and it's not very interesting to me, the Netherese city. So I'm cutting that out. Instead, I wanted to say what the Arcane Brotherhood is here for. So I came up, this whole one shot is what crystallized in my mind for it. Ironic, and you'll find out in a second why I said crystallized. And that is one of the there's an encounter in here that was interesting called this Netherese nautical ship. The Id Ascending is the name of the subplot. I'm going to throw most of that out because it's a little but the basic plot is this Nautilus ship, a Mind Flayer Spelljammer style ship, has crash landed in Icewind Dale, and there's some other plot lines to it that they have to try to get it working again and get it flying. I'm going to wipe all that out because it's a little silly for the style of adventure. Because when you get over into the adventure itself, you have these gnomish mind flayers, which are very cartoony, and they don't fit the genre of the campaign so far. It's a horror based campaign, so I'm going to toss them and get I might reskin them, their art, and just say they're sort of lower level mind flayers, like recently transformed mind flayers. But I want to have some reason. I want to start out in the jungles of Chult with this one shot. I'm going to do some combat, get the ship in the air, and with the end result being that this ship crashes in Icewind Dale, and that's how it gets there. And there's going to be some MacGuffin. And I wanted some magic item on it that the Arcane Brother here is looking for. Hey, Nikki, how are you doing? It's great to have you here. I wanted some item on here that that the Arcane Brotherhood is looking for, that the players want to keep out of their hands. So we cut back to Heidinger Laura, and let me screenshot her if I can. I'll actually bring it over here. Hopefully you'll be able to see this in the stream. Yeah, so that's my Twitter, and let's go down to Laura Burrian. There we go. She's a great Twitter. I give her a follow. Nikki the Beholder is online, by the way, too. I really suggest you give her a follow. She's a really great podcaster, great D&D player, and great D&D DM. So I hope you'll give her a follow as well. But yeah, this is Lauren. She came up with this post a little bit earlier about these crystals, and I can't find it. I'm not going to bother trying to find it. That were, make sure, yeah, so the Jungles of Chult pictures we'll see later. But yeah, so she came with this idea of these geode kind of crystals and say, oh, these could be store memories and things like that. And this sparked whole thought of what this item can be. Hey, Nikki was saying she's okay, she's tired, but I'm doing good too. I'm tired. I had a late night of gaming on Cyberpunk 2077, and I was stuck for my D&D one shot. So I got this great inspiration on Twitter with this person posted about these geodes that could store memories, and that sparked me to think of the Mind Flayer ship in Rime and the Frost Maiden, and how could I create a series of adventures that got there? So what do I want the MacGuffin? I often start when I create my adventures where I want to end up, or what the risk is, like what scene do I have as an outcome, and then I work backwards from there. So what I want is a crashed Nautilus ship, Mind Flayer Nautilus ship, with these crystals on them that are a new magic item from that cause some threat. So they have these minds trapped in them, but they're also souls. One of the things I do genre-wise, other people think about psionics very differently in the D&D sphere. I view psionics as I don't like to do only psionics, like power of the mind, without the power of the spirit in D&D. I just think it's thematically, I'm just not interested in it. The mind being its own thing, separate from all other elements, that's really a sci-fi thing, because it's tech-based. Technology has replaced spirituality and esoterica in the sci-fi setting, but in the D&D setting, the mind and the spirit are sort of one thing. So trapping a mind in a stone is akin to trapping the soul stuck in one period of its life. So the creation of this magic item is this inherent evil thing so we're in the Jungles of Chult, and this is what the adventure is going to be. I'm going to have it start in media res, which means in the middle of the action. I want this revolt to be happening against these odd masters, I'll call them. And in the encounter, I never want to call them mind flayers, because I just want to describe them and let the players arrive at that conclusion. But anyway, they'll have these sort of temples set up in the deep jungles where they've been oppressing the citizenry, and they've been harvesting their minds and kidnapping powerful people from the cities in the Forgotten Realms, and they torture them and they kill them. And at the last moment that they kill them, they're able to trap their minds in these stones, and the power that person was reaching out to in the midst of their death to protect them, that's the power that they trap in the stone. So this is a pretty horrific encounter. I want it to be horrific, because I want it to have that Cthulhu feeling that ties into the theme of the Rime of the Frost Maiden campaign. So that's the magical MacGuffin. That's the thing that when we get back to the campaign, that's the thing the Arcane Brotherhood is after. They're after uncovering how to make more of these items and these items themselves. So that creates a moral challenge for the players. Do the players want to harvest that themselves? I doubt it. They're good players. They certainly probably want to stop the Arcane Brotherhood, because there's no limit to where they're willing to go with it, and keep that technology out of their hands. So that's what the Arcane Brotherhood is here for. And this adventure is, how did this ship get to this place to discover this was a problem in the first place? So I'm going to start with a revolt in the jungle. I just need a couple of encounters. It's a single 3-hour session, so that's when I need to plan. So when you plan as a GM, 3 hours you got to make it through, baby. So you got to keep that tight. It's got to be a tight game. Now it's mostly going to be combat in this session, because role playing is good to have, but it's hard to do big setups and big payoffs. So I'm gonna set them in the middle of the action. They're either from the outside, having come here to get rid of these folks, or they're going to be 5th level, or they're part of the local villages casting out these masters. So it'll be in the front of this big temple that sort of reminiscent. I hate to do these cultural sort of analogs, but it's hard to do in these cases. So I don't want to describe it as Aztec, but think of it as a mix of between sort of very old Chinese mythology, Aztec mythology, Angkor Wat in Asia, that kind of like an Egyptian mythology. Like I'm gonna mix all of those symbologies together. So they're gonna be a sort of a trapped, enslaved people who are now sort of becoming free. There's gonna be an encounter where they have to stop the guards from killing the prisoners that are left. So they're there freeing the prisoners. They'll have a choice to pursue into the temple the Odd Masters, the guards of the Odd Masters, or stop some of their mind control guards and maybe a T-Rex from killing off the mind controlled T-Rex. It'll have like a big crystal headset and a crystal in it that's controlling it and pulsing with energy, and the T-Rex will run around chomping on people, and the players can morally decide, is it okay to let these prisoners die to get to the temple quicker, or do they need to delay themselves? So that'll be their first challenge. Then they'll work through that. At some point, I want to express the horror of this by having some of these slaves are being turned into servants, and I'll have one or two of them like hold their head, scream strongly, and then like their head will explode and an intellect devourer will come out, and there'll even be some more combat from there. And I'm going to use. There was a great video by Matt Colville about using 4th edition in 5th edition. Highly, by the way, Tears of My Players is my mug today. So in that video, he talked about using these sort of special abilities that are somewhere between legendary abilities and something else. So just give an extra kick to an encounter. So I'm going to have, every time one of these players think they're freeing somebody, one or two of these people that were prisoners will grab their head and they'll scream out loud and their head will explode. And everyone, it'll have a small like D4, D6 damage within a 20-foot radius. Psychic energy, you might do an intel save. And then there's a combat with a couple of intellect devours. And it'll begin to dawn on the players that there's mind players at stake. And the intention will be the players will fight up into the temple, which will have some steps to go up, and there'll be a final like a volcano going off, because that's really very Lost Worldy, right? And there'll be like rocks splitting, and there'll be an earthquake happening, and all these servants will be running around, and they'll get to the final mind flayer master, and they'll just feel this sense of the earth breaking away. And what I want here is I want that to be the climactic fight, but again, I need it to end up in Icewind Dale unexpectedly. So when they go into the temple, I want them to feel this jarring, them getting thrown around, this is intense earthquake. Maybe tie it back to the volcano that's happening, but not realize what's happening is this ship has lifted off. This hidden ship behind the temple has lifted off, and the masters are trying to get away. So when they get in there, they'll have this final fight on a ship. The mind flayers will have these on pedestal, these crystals with people's minds and souls trapped into them. There'll be some minor mind flayers around, maybe some intellect devours and a few things like that. And they'll work through that, and they'll have these random spells coming from these crystals that they'll have to deal with. This is a tip Nikki was saying, by the way, Matt Colville spelling, make some amazing monsters. Yeah, I didn't hear them until my DM or Behold Clearlight started DMing for us, but I'm loving it. Yeah, I agree, Nikki. Yeah, Matt is just obviously great. You know, he had a huge success with Followers and Strongholds, that Kickstarter, huge success with Kingdoms and Warfare. But what a lot of people in the social media and creator space know him for, if you haven't seen it, there's a series called Running the Game, which he's got like 100 videos at an hour each or something like that. They're crazy good, but they're just so in depth, and it takes a long time to get through them. But they're probably some of the best best things you can sort of milk for gaming, right? And your DMing. So I would really suggest anybody take a look at those. Those are fantastic. But anyway, from that, this idea of introducing these sort of minor abilities that trigger either one time in an encounter or repeatedly in an encounter, in addition to the actions of an individual monster. And I'll tell you design-wise why that works in 5th edition. I don't think he said this specifically, but the implication is there. The reason why that design works, like adding an extra ability that kicks off at an initiative point or kicks off at a like at the top of the round or the bottom of the round, or recharges that it doesn't take the monster's action to do, is DMs need something in between adding multiple monsters, right, to like ruin the action economy and giving it legendary actions. We need something in between to have another lever to turn to amp up the tension in an adventure without a total party killer. We're not trying to kill our party. So adding a whole other monster with another set of abilities, that creates a real problem, because you have another stack of hit points, you have another stack of movement, you have another place the players can go. So that's like the difference between adding a +2 or a plus D4 to a roll and giving advantage on a roll. The difference between those two are stark. The gap is very between a normal roll and advantage is quite wide. We don't use it a lot, but that additional D4 is kind of that's kind of the middle point between advantage and a regular roll. And we don't have that when it comes to adding an ability to a monster or upping an encounter. Well, I should say we do, but most people don't use it. Like the easiest ways to create that middle space between a legendary action, like adding more monsters or having a single bad guy is to have like an added environmental challenge or an added ability. And an added ability is really no different than an environmental challenge. You can have like an earthquake happening that might knock the players down. And one of the things I like for these additional abilities is not more damage. I actually think, because you've already got usually enough damage within the NPC, especially if it's a single big bad guy with tons of hit points, they're probably putting out damage pretty heavily. I did this in my Frost Giant redesign from a couple of weeks ago video. I had this Frost Giant with massive burst damage. I wanted to bring their damage down a little bit and give them another ability. So what that gave them was Thunder Wave. Which really just pushed the players around a little bit and created more drama. But actually the 2d8 of that ability that they could do was a heck of a lot less than the 3d12 plus 6 that the Frost Giant Skeleton could do with its battle axe. So it seemed bad. The players took it as bad, and they took it as a big challenge. But the truth is, it actually was the GM being kind to the players and reducing the damage they take, but it gave them an extra effect. So it had that feeling of, oh my God, you're taking my movement away, or you're making me do something. You're making me remove to a place that I just got to, or you're acting on me in a way that you're pushing me around, like I'm failing and flying. So it gives this feeling of risk, and it gives us feeling of loss, and it gives us feeling of tension. It increases the tension, but it doesn't actually make it more deadly. And DMs want to do that. We want to we're all illusionists, right? We're all really we're faking it, right? We want to make you feel like we're trying to kill you. We're not trying to kill you. We want you to succeed. There's nothing better than players like cheering when they crush that big obstacle you put in their way. And that's the social contract we don't talk about. Sometimes when games get unhealthy, they sometimes called adversarial. Players can see the DM as an adversary, and they're not, of course. But there's a reason why that thinking develops, and it's not unnatural. It's that it's the structure of the game. The game is that you have this group who sits down and says, "Man, wouldn't it be cool if we did this thing?" And there's one person at the table whose job it is to say yes, and then move that thing just out of their reach. How frustrating is that? So you keep that in mind, but you want them to reach it, right? So that's the intention of a GM and this sort of greatness of role playing, right? Why these games are so much fun. So that's what I want to do here. So I want the players to enter this temple. They want to go through a couple of chambers, get into this sort of alien structure now. Now it's not stone anymore. It's just sort of chitinous tunnel or rooms, and they don't, and a door will close behind them, and they don't realize they're actually now in a ship. And the volcano I set up nearby that's been causing earthquakes, they feel even, oh, it's getting more, there's more tremors, it's really throwing you around. They don't realize the ship has taken off. So by the time they get to it, when they're defeating the bad guy, they will cause the ship to crash. And they'll get a glimpse of that. And actually, this is where I'm going to have to beg a lot of patience from my players, because I'm going to kill these characters. They're all 5th level. There's one-shot characters. You're just creating them once. I'll leave it unknown. But at the end, the last thing they'll see is they'll emerge from the front of the ship. They'll see they're flying in the air or going into this area of darkness. They come across these mountains. There's just ice everywhere. They were in the jungle before, and they don't know this thing is moving incredibly fast, and it's just heading straight toward the ground, and then they hit. And that's where the session is going to end. Now, the reason why it can be satisfying is we pick up with the players. The very next session, I want them to find the ship or find evidence of the ship. And these mind crystals that will come from the characters that they played in this one shot. So I'll give the players immediately the context of the in-character context for the adventure that we just had. Nikki was saying, I may need to pick your brain one day. I'm building a story for a future campaign. This is really detailed. Yeah, sorry, it's probably like really nerdy detail. Sorry, Nikki. That's my stream. You know, I'm not looking to be a big YouTuber. I mean, there is no D&D fame. People put that out there, but that's not really just true. It's just I don't think that's a thing. It's a thing for like Matt Colville, but it's never going to be a thing for me. I'm just looking to foster D&D's discussion and push them to other creators, because it's the community of creators that is so important. Nikki Beholder to no one is that's the person I'm talking to you right now, by the way. Give her a follow. Look for her on Twitch. The Adventuring Guild is another one that I highly recommend. There's a bunch of people. I think DM, Hiding the Laura. There's bunches of people. If you follow me on Twitter, look at my followers list. I don't follow indiscriminately. I try to follow people who really have something to contribute, and I only post about D&D. So give these people a follow. They're really, I mean, it's just top notch. And, and the more ideas you can get, the better. This is why diversity is so important in gaming, right? This is worth saying. I don't talk about life a lot on these streams. That's intentional. I don't talk about politics or anything. So I'm not going to talk about politics here, but I'll say this one thing. I work in IT, and I work in national IT infrastructure. And so I'm passionate about raising that. And diversity in any industry, including gaming, is important for the same exact reason. And I'll say it in gaming. But I say this as it relates to software engineering and technology. In gaming, the product of gaming, the adventures and the social situations, they're only as good as the conceptual models we bring to the table, right? We're only as good as the different ideas and thoughts and backgrounds that people bring into this hobby that we have. That's the product. That's the value, not the rules, not the pictures, not the maybe a little bit the characters, but the ideas, right? Conceptual models. That's what's the product. That's our raw material to make games out of. And we've gotten a lot in gaming out of a narrow set of ideas, right? Like, I'm from that generation, a lot of dudes that look like me. And I'm not actually bringing us down. I mean, we did a lot of great things, but we mostly came from sort of lower middle class or central middle class folks out of the 80s, right? And we did this sort of this narrow sword and sorcery idea, or Conan, which was great for the time. But we've done what we can do with that. That's a dry well right? So bringing in people with different points of view, different backgrounds, different ideas, different takes on how to socialize, that is what brings a richness to tabletop role-playing games that you can never have. So we are only as good as the ideas we bring to the table, and the only way to do that is to bring people who are not like us along with us and learn something from them, and hopefully they'll learn something from us. Anyway, they don't get off my soapbox there. That's why it's why important. So where to get to this is foster that discussion. Gatekeepers have no utility in the D&D space. They just don't, right? So get into a discussion with somebody else, as long as it's honest, right? I get as frustrated as anybody about people scoring points on social media. I get as frustrated as anybody else, and I try to opt out of that conversation. But engage as many people as you can, and whether it's on Twitter, whether it's here on Twitch, whether it's on YouTube, wherever you podcast. I mean, these podcasters. I've run podcasts before, by the way. Yes, someone asked a question a while ago. It was a weird question. It was like, "Are you somebody?" Yes, I'm somebody. Everybody's somebody. Yeah, I published in the RPG space before. I'm not going to get into it. It wouldn't be that hard to figure out though. So yeah, I've been in the gaming for a while and sort of publishing front-facing stuff for a little while in different ways. But it's irrelevant. I just want to talk about D&D here. So where was I going with that? Yeah, so just engage people in discussions without this sort of gatekeeping piece of it, because it just has no place in D&D. There's no place in it. All right, I've been making you look at a small picture of my face in a thing I'm not typing on because it's from a previous, so that's probably not compelling. All right, so let's go back to the one shot. So what do I need out of the one shot? So let's talk about techniques and creators again. Again, I plug it every time. This is the technique that I've added to, called the Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master. Mike Shea, great author. You'll see him a lot of places in D&D. The Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master, great book. Go ahead, and I highly recommend picking it up. But this has got a format called the sort of session prep that has a couple of sections where you list out the players and what their characters are, what do they want. I added a section for themes, so I can always bring back to make sure I'm sticking to a central theme. So in this theme for this one shot, I want horror, the Arcane Brotherhood, casting off oppression to be a central theme. What do I want out of this session? I put in themes. That's another area I put. So I want a fun action-based adventure. I want to free some, and what do I want? I want to free some tribes people. I want to show this alien culture amongst these mind flayers. I want to set this tone of stolen dreams. I want to set this tone of dangerous magical powers. And why? Why do I want to do that? One of the things that I think people misunderstand about 5th edition, I have a hard time moving past, and other people I see have a hard time moving past, is everything is transactional, right? Everything is put from the player's point of view. And because we think that these rules created for the players, we think that that's how the whole world operates, but that's not true. 5th edition was never intended to do that. If you look at monster stat blocks, they're not trying to give you the diversity of stuff a player can do. They're just trying to create a couple abilities that may or may not be in alignment with what players can do. Bandits get multi-attack, for instance. They're not 5th level fighters. They just have multi-attack because that's the best way to handle these creatures in an encounter. So there's no reason to make the rest of the world transactional to the player characters. So when I say dangerous magical powers, it's not something a player can just learn or cast with a spell slot. It's not something a player, you apply strict rules to it. You can keep it mysterious. So like a stone with someone's soul and mind trapped in it at the moment of their death, reaching out for this ability, and it can once a day cast a spell. So maybe it's wand-like. If I want to make it not wand-like though, I'm debating. If you have a thought on this, because I'd love to hear about it in the adventure, because I'm debating giving each stone a one power to do, or giving them a recharge, like a 5 or a 6 on a D6. I don't want to do the recharge because I don't want to keep track of like 7 recharge things. But that's another option. So there's a variable amount of power these things can project in an encounter. So I've thought about that. I'll probably just do 1 and have like 6 of them around. So encounter design too. What do I want these stones to do? I just said earlier, I don't want, I'll continue. Let me continue going through this format, and I'll talk about what I want out of it. So themes, that's a section I added. Plot threads, that's a section I've added. So the mind players set up a small spell jammer outpost, stealing minds in a sacrificial ritual that requires them to kill the host and steal their soul at the moment of pain and death. It creates a spell quartz, a magical item that steals whatever ability the host was reaching out for to protect themselves at the moment of death. This creates stones that let them use a per day ability or spell. I wrote that just before I started this stream, again, because of Lauren's tweet. Thank you, Lauren. You're amazing. That was, and that's where I got that whole thing. It's like, oh yeah, this would be awesome. And then just another plot thread. The Odd Masters have kept power through a series of crystal skull statues, indestructible to weapons. They stopped working 2 days ago. I don't know if I'm going anywhere with that, because I have to come up with why. Like, it'd be great for players to get into they don't know it to be a ship, but into the temple and realize something has gone wrong there, that something broke, and that's the whole reason why this came crashing down. But I'll tell you, as a DM, the reason why I'm hesitant of that is what I said earlier. Like, how much plot can I get across in a one-shot session? And we'll start 20 minutes late because people are coming into the VTT and they're talking and you know, that, which is fine, but you know, 2.5 hours realistically. How much of that? And we have to stop right at that because we do 8 to 11 on a night in our local environment. That's another plot. That's another tip I'll give, by the way. I don't game, even though I'm doing virtual tabletop. I'm gaming with people in my local area because I want to go back to face gaming. So I'm trying to foster even online. I'm trying to foster people I know here locally, and that's how that's working for me. And it's working pretty well. So I suggest you try to do the same thing too. Start fostering who you would game with once the pandemic lifts now. Do it now, because if you jump forward to, I don't know what it's going to be for us, 3 months, 6 months, I hope not more than 6 months, but maybe. And if you've gotten to know those people online, it's going to be so much easier to convert to a face-to-face game at the end of it. But anyway, back to here. Like, what's this point about the crystal that started to free people? I'll just have like a side effect. I'll put a note for myself, side effect, notice something on the side. No, actually, there is something here now that I think about it. So what do I want? Ultimately, where I want this to end up is I want, in the campaign, is I want the players to find this ship, realize that the Arcane Brotherhood, well, I don't want them to find the ship right away, because that's like a 6th level, 7th level adventure. But I want them to realize that the Arcane Brotherhood is looking for a Ithiliad technology, like something that'll be the stake. There'll be a progression of what I want them to find out. Actually, maybe this is good to back up to as well. I just had an exchange on Twitter, and I talked about it earlier in the stream about this progression. Don't set up binary pass or fail rolls. So what I want players to do is realize a little bit. There's a number of secrets they could find out, there's a place to do that down here called Secrets and Information. So the stones, the crystal stones, the what do I call it? Spell quartz. Help if I spelled it right. Quartz. TZ. So what is it? So I already got like trapped at moment of death. I have with the power they were reaching out for. With power they were reaching out for. So what made me stop just here when I did it, which is this idea of if the one-shot players get in here and realize that what kept what kept everybody oppressed is a central crystal where the mind flayers were able to harvest some soul, which had some like mass domination or something like that. That's what kept people in line in the area. And there's a way for these crystals to be destroyed and the soul to be released. That's what stopped me here. Is like, you want to set up the stakes for something. You want to set up a moral choice for players. You want to set up the premise of the choice, and then you want to set up some outcomes for it. So the ultimate outcome, I want to make it a little bit less binary than this, but ultimately the outcome would be: do you go for personal power by essentially torturing these people's minds and spirit eternally by keeping them trapped in these crystals to give you power? Or do you release their spirit to let them go? This was a problem I had with the Descent into Avernus campaign. It's like this one of the MacGuffins, a tiny item in it, were these soul coins where people's souls were trapped, and they would feed these into their motorcycles to get them to use. I'm like, wait a minute, the moral choice of getting a player, the moral choice of someone saying, let me destroy a soul so I can ride this neat motorcycle, was weird. That was really weird for me. And a couple other players I've heard that too, but not many people have. But anyway, so what I want to set up morality wise is, do they release the souls and release the power, and do they discover the way to do it in this one-shot adventure? And that leads them to understanding that there's a way to do it. So yeah, so I could set up the information for my main campaign with sort of this interlude one-shot by setting the premise that these items can be destroyed and the souls released and sent on to their afterlife. I think that I love that idea. So set something where souls are released and item destroyed. I need to set something though. I don't know what that's going to be. I don't know that I need to do it in this adventure though. And this is where punting is an important DMing skill. We got about 11 minutes, so I'll try not to wax too philosophic here. The punting is hugely important. Like I call it the J.J. Abrams effect, because J.J. Abrams punts all the time. He sets up a great premise. His weakness is maybe sometimes he doesn't follow through it. And I know I talk about J.J. Abrams a lot in this stream, so sorry, folks. I like J.J. Abrams. I'm just saying that, but his inability to follow through has been, I don't know if it's his inability, but it hasn't happened one way or another. And that's caused some consternation amongst fans in different genres. And you don't want to do that as a DM. Like the thing about punting is you really need to rack your brain later to come up with, how do I make this make sense, right? So all I will do in this adventure is set up that the stone that they get into the middle of the temple. They'll see this pillar set up that's connected to these other crystal skulls. I'll say there's energy flowing through them still, but it's erratic. It looks like a Kylo Ren's lightsaber, where it's obviously going all over the place and setting off these other stones. And maybe that's what creates the environmental hazard as they fight this last mind flayer. It's obviously malfunctioning or it's been damaged. So. And they'll even hear the scream from it. So they'll see this ghost sort of wailing and flailing back and forth, and it's like trying to pull itself out of the stone, right? It's like trying to pull itself out of mud or clay, and it's just trying to get away. So the ultimate thing the players are faced with is, can they fight this mind flayer to give this thing time to get out? So like they'll see it pulling itself up a little bit more every time, and when it finally releases itself. That's what destroys the ship. That's what not destroys it, but causes the ship to crash, right? So, yeah, that's a secret. So, let me put down here, spirit. So the upside of this and the tease for this, for the Game Master, is it will tell the players in out of character knowledge that there's a way to release these spirits. They just won't know what it is. So I can punt on that to later in the main campaign and say, okay, players, you need to look and figure out how you're going to find this information out. Because one of the player characters is a researcher, and researching that information is good. So what I'll have is this is what we'll do. So spirit release. I know I'm jumping around in my thinking here. Sorry about that. Release. Spirit released from stone during fight, and it pulls itself out every round or two, a little more. So the players, they'll get there, they'll be in this main fight, and with this mind flayer, there'll be these stones around the combat where they're just kicking off these abilities. And I said earlier about not wanting to do damage abilities. That's true. I still don't want to do damage abilities, but I want to do what I did earlier with that Frost Giant encounter. I want to give them environmental effects that create problems from these. So these stones, I'll do these potential scenes. That's where I should list it. So again, this is Return to the Lazy Dungeon Master. So there's a couple of scenes I know I want. I know one outside the temple. So we'll pick up a media res, freeing the prisoners. I want to have that a T-Rex controlled still. I know I want to have a mind flayer escape from some of the prisoners. Not mind flayer, intellect devourer. So as they rescue these prisoners, one or two of them there'll be a light combat. They'll have to do combat with the T-Rex. But T-Rex is actually for 5th level party, not that hard. So they'll be able to take this T-Rex down. That'll feel like a good accomplishment. They'll get into the caves. One or two of them, their heads will explode. Intellect devourers will come out. They're more nuisancey for a 5th level character, but still dangerous because they have this ability where they can stun you immediately. I think it sends you to 0 hit points or something like that, or makes you incapacitated with an intelligence saving throw, which is frequently a dump stat for player characters. Intellect devourer pops out of heads. And I want to be careful not to say intellect devourer. I never say it, right? Never say the word. Do not speak its name. And so that's the fight. Then up to the temple. up to the, well, actually, I want an interlude scene here. I don't want to go from counter to encounter. I want to go from then our play, quick role playing encounter, a quick beat where players talk to the village or to the prisoners. Villagers about what they're going to do next. So you go. So I'll say like you go, I will get the people back to their homes. So they'll send the players up into the temple and they'll stay behind. I have to come up with something, some sort of emotionally evocative set of leaders or tribesmen, or maybe some of the prisoners that they're freeing, right? I want these to be leaders of the prisoners who have been sacrificing themselves. So set up somebody very, very sympathetic. To, we'll say, a small band of like elder tribal leaders. That'll be great. Elder tribal leaders. A bunch of men and women, if they have genders at all, who are sacrificing themselves to distract the T-Rex. And that will be, we'll get our people back to their homes. You must end this, bring this to an end, go into the temple and bring down the Odd Masters. That's what they'll do. So then there'll be a quick role-playing beat to let them know what the outcome of their heroism will do, because I'm keeping in mind the players don't know this, but the GM knows this. They'll never get to see the outcome. So they know the stakes of their sacrifice are to free the people, set the stakes that if they fail, the mines will be captured again. And they'll give them something. We will run, but you must end this. End this. We cannot return to being slaves. I hate to bring that word up, but yeah, I'll say prisoners. I keep trying to say prisoners instead of slaves because that's what it is, but I just don't want to. Yeah, so they'll say something like that. So the players go into the temple for this final fight knowing the stakes of what if they fail. Hey, shifting to Wolf, good to see you here. Good evening. How are you? I didn't know it's morning where I'm at, but I'm good. Thanks for coming. Thanks for participating in the chat. I'm going to be closing up in another 10 minutes. If you have a D&D question, please let me know. So what this does in the format I'm using here is a Return to Lazy Dungeon Master format. So the potential scenes are outside the temple. In media res, we begin outside the temple. This fight to free the prisoners. Then we have a quick beat with a role playing outside the temple where the prisoners now are freed and discussing what they'll do next to set up the tension and then into the temple, pursuing the Odd Masters. Fight, and which leads to final fight with the Mind Flayer boss. Maybe crew members, or that might even be better. That might be cool. So we know with the final fight of the Mind Flayer boss, there are spell quartz mounted all around, kicking off abilities like Earthquake and things like. I'll look up. So I'd rather do like things that slow their movement, knock them down, make them confused, give conditions instead of damage, because the Mind Flayer is going to do enough damage. So mounted all around, kicking off abilities. Something else would be great about this location, and this bleeds over into this fantastic locations thing, by the way. So something else is I'll have these Mind Flayers sort of in these chambers. So Mind Flayers in chambers. Controlling the stones and the ship. So they'll basically be, the players can realize that they can reduce these stones, kicking off abilities every round by taking out, it'd be like an intellect devourer or some creature. So some creature allied with the Mind Flayer embedded in these like back the tubes, right? These these liquid tubes hanging behind the stones. And so the players realize that they break those things, they can stop these stones from distracting them or keep them from moving forward. I might even want to put a shield. Ooh, that would be great. Shield spell keeps them from attacking my player until they break the controlling tube. So that's kind of how there's some creature, some affiliate, intellect devourer, half affiliate, something like that, holding on, like controlling the mind from a tube behind it. And once you kill that creature, which will be like a minion, they'll be able to do it like that. That's what releases these creatures, right? Or something like that. That will at least shut the power of their ability to directly control these stones down. And yeah, and so that will cause. But what the players don't know is as they do that, these tubes are also controlling the ship. And that's ultimately what the ship will cause the ship to crash. So to defeat the mind players, they want to destroy the ships around it. And I'll have some plot device that if they don't, they'll just explode or something like that. So if they go right for the mind flayer. But yeah, so that's basically mind flayer, ER. Yeah, a bunch of misspellings, I know that. Yeah, Shifted Wolf. I love watching people prep while I homebrew. So using our beloved affiliate. Yeah. I love mind flayers. I just do. I like shadows, mind flayers. I love intellect devourers. Actually, I'll say this: they're underused. Intellect devourers are always thrown out there as these little pets or dogs, but I like to use them as a hidden enemy. So I ran a section in a campaign around a smuggling crew that was smuggling, this is my Eberron campaign, that were smuggling magic items and these sort of corrupted gems out of this area. The backplot's not important. But the ultimate person, they couldn't figure it out at first, kept being like the boss of this gang was a different person, and they kept changing over time. And it seemed at first like the gang was changing hands, but then they were like, wait a minute, it's the same orders and the same kind of personality. And they realized it was an intellect devourer because they kept finding the old body with its head sort of crushed in, and they were realizing, oh, this is an intellect devourer possessing different people, getting their knowledge and moving forward. And it created this fantastic horror scenario. When they finally took it out, it was a great session. Yeah, the Neolithid either. Yeah, shifting to Wolf is saying, haven't seen many DMs use the Neolithid either. Yeah, so the ship itself, I think they've said that several. I anticipate there's going to be a main book for Spelljammer coming out next year in 5th edition. I'm not alone there. Everyone's predicting it. This year, I think they said 3 setting books were going to be released next year, which would be good. We don't have a ton of setting books. I think everyone's anticipating Spelljammer is going to be one of that. They see this affiliate ship from Rime the Frost Maiden teasing that. I do too. So yeah, I'll definitely lean into that when it happens. So anyway, that's where I'm going to go. I'm going to leave that here because I'm right at our hour. I feel like I have a great set of adventures. So something that really, I think, help the players find some action adventure. The intention is here that I'm setting something up in my campaign where the players find out that the Arcane Brotherhood is after this crash ship. They're after the secret to create these stones. They want to keep it out of their Arcane Brotherhood's hands, and that's going to create a set of adventure in my campaign. But the players won't know this until the last moments of this idiocentric one-shot. That's where I'm going with all of this. And the players have a way to find out about, so they're stuck with this out-of-character knowledge that can let them smugly know what's going on. I'm not going to leave them with that too long. They're going to eventually find one of these mind stones that saw what happened on the ship, that will pass the individual players the in-character knowledge that those one-shot characters had, so they don't have to keep doing that over time. But that means I don't want to reveal too much information to those one-shot characters either. So I think, anyway, that's what I call an interlude one-shot. It's a one-shot that feeds into the main campaign, that provides you with more plot elements. And I think it gives you the advantage of, you can leave a couple outcomes fuzzy. You can say, well, I don't know what the state of this Nautilus ship is. I don't know what the story of how it got there was. And you don't know from the write-up. I don't know what kind of magic items it was carrying. But creating this one-shot makes all of that, right? You have the whole backstory of this little one-shot adventure that would be in the main campaign encounter. Now you have all this rich backstory to it. So I love using this. So I suggest you do too as well. And maintain the alienness of it. And if you're using mind flayers. Thanks, Shifting to Wolf. Yeah, I hope players will have a lot of fun with the mind flayers. I hope they do too. Mind flayers are there. So one more thing. I know we're just a little bit over time. You have to be really careful with mind flayers, intellect devours, and other things. Is taking agency from a player is generally a pretty bad thing. You don't want to do that too often. So I don't have them act in that way. You want to just tease that threat, but you don't want to do it more often. But DMs who don't realize that sometimes overuse the domination or mind control or something like that. I think that's something to stay away from. Like, have them dominate the player's allies. That's hugely threatening. And there was yesterday, I think we had a sort of exchange on Twitter about this. One other thing I'll point out about the difference between player agency and domination and how it relates to it, because this is an important discussion I thought happened on Twitter yesterday. Keep in mind, there's a huge difference. Understand what player agency is. Agency is about choices. And people sometimes misunderstand, because there's weird questions yesterday about, is like a sleep spell taking away player agency or something like that. It's not. There's a difference between imposing a condition on a player, like sleep, saying they're unconscious or they're dying or whatever. That's part of the game. There's a difference between that and imposing a choice on players. They're telling them your character decides to do this. It's taking the one thing players have in that's entirely theirs and should be inviolable. They should not be able to violate this. They have choice. They can choose to do whatever. Now, the DM tells them what the consequences of that is, and the players have to live with those consequences. But at the end of the day, it's the player's choice to make, and it should never not be. So there's a huge difference between imposing a condition and imposing a choice on a player. DMs really should never impose a choice. And I think that it's really important to understand the difference between those things. And you get into that area when you start talking about mind flayers, and you should be aware of that. Anyway, all right. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap that up here today. I really appreciate it if you've been able to join us. I enjoy these streams every week. I hope you'll give me a like, follow. I hope you will do all of the social media things. You'll follow me on Twitter, follow me on YouTube. I hope you'll follow me on Twitch. I hope you'll join me in future sessions. I do this every week at noon Eastern time on Saturdays. We talk about D&D. Bring your questions. I hope you'll join me in future sessions. I would love to talk with you about D&D and foster a great discussion. You can go ahead and find me on Twitter. Give me a like, follow there. All the social media things. That would be super helpful. I have started streaming some video game content. I don't intend to. I'm just doing that for funsies, but my main content will always be D&D. I even talk about D&D during the live streams. So anyway, thank you very much for joining me today. Again, I'm Optional Rule. You can find me online, optionalrule.com, Twitter under Optional Rule, Twitch under Optional Rule, Optional Rule everywhere. It's your options, your rules. Keep it going. All right, so until next time, thank you everybody for joining me. And until then, remember, fun, not optional. Thanks, everybody. Take care.